Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
The introduction. On that chilly eve in late October, the small town of Maplewood began to settle into its quiet routine. Shadows lengthened as sunlight dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow across the historic buildings lining Main Street. It was the kind of evening that felt alive with secrets. Yet many residents tucked away these thoughts, hurrying home as the ghosts of the past seemed to breathe in the cooling air. Among these historical landmarks stood the Maplewood Inn, a charming brick structure with ivy climbing its wall. It had long been a refuge for weary travelers, and as the clock struck 9, the sound of the front door opening signaled the arrival of a stranger. A figure swathed in dark clothing stepped inside, stirring the warm air. He walked to the reception desk, greeted only by the soft hum of the overhead lights and the faint ticking of the wall clock. The innkeeper, a silver-haired woman named Edith. "Welcome to Maplewood? One night or more?" The man hesitated before replying, his eyes scanning the lobby as if searching, not for a room, but something more elusive. "Just the night," he murmured, his voice gravelly, as he filled out the registration form. A sense of dread loomed faintly over the air. Unknown to its guests, the peaceful facade belied a sinister truth that would unfold in the days to follow, leaving the town to grapple with the real horror lurking beneath their small-town charm. Little did they know, a storm was brewing on the horizon, one that would expose their darkest reality. In just 24 hours, the town's tranquility would be shattered, and the echoes of the past would resurface, dragging old wounds back into the light. The victim. Dawn broke over Maplewood, casting a pale light through the window of room 5 at the Maplewood Inn. Inside, the air was still but charged with an unsettling energy. Layers of dust danced in the golden rays, disturbed only by the rustle of sheets as Clara Bennett roused from a restless sleep. A local journalist, Clara was in town to cover the upcoming Harvest Festival, but her focus had drifted to a different story, a hunch that something darker loomed beneath Maplewood's idyllic surface. Today was supposed to be filled with pageantry and celebration, yet Clara sensed that an unseen narrative was waiting to be uncovered. After a quick breakfast in the inn's modest dining room, she resolved to explore the remnants of Maplewood's history, hoping to weave together the town's hidden tales. With her notebook in hand, she stepped outside, into the brisk autumn air. Leaves crunched beneath her feet as she ventured toward the old abandoned railway station on the outskirts of town, a sight whispered about amongst locals. Just as she neared the station, a series of sharp cries pierced the morning silence. Clara's heart raced. Curiosity pulled her toward the commotion. As she turned the corner, an overwhelming sight greeted her. A cluster of shocked townsfolk had gathered, the buzz of terrified whispers swallowing the air. Her journalist instincts kicked in. There, lying lifeless on the cracked pavement, was the body of a man, a stranger, no less. A thick pool of crimson encircled him like a macabre halo, and the shock on the faces of the gathered crowd mirrored Clara's own sense of revulsion. He was unrecognizable to most, yet in a small town like Maplewood, everyone was bound together by invisible threads. Questions swirled in her mind. Was he? And what foul fate had befallen him? Clara knew this was only the beginning. The victim would speak even in silence, and she was determined to uncover his story, however painful it might prove to be. The crime scene. As the sun climbed higher, casting a harsher light upon the scene, the atmosphere grew thick with tension. Clara maneuvered through the growing crowd, her instincts drawing her toward the front where a pair of uniformed officers stood, boarding off the area with yellow tape. The acrid scent of blood intermingled with the damp, musty scent of fall leaves, creating a strangely visceral backdrop to this unfolding tragedy. "Step back, folks," one officer called out, his voice firm yet strained. Clara caught glimpses of the body of a man in his early 30s, dressed inconspicuously in a flannel shirt and jeans. Aggressive bruising marked his neck, and Clara's keen eye noted the way his limbs lay twisted at unnatural angle. This was no accident. He was a crime born of fury. She scribbled notes furiously, heart pounding. Nearby, the townspeople whispered in hushed tones, their faces painted with a blend of shock and wide-eyed curiosity. Among them, Clara spotted Edith, the innkeeper. Her hands clasped tightly together as she strained to catch a glimpse. The warmth of yesterday faded into a pallor of uncertainty. Sirens broke the lethargy of the autumn day as first responders arrived, their vehicles splashing colors against the muted palette of the landscape. Time slowed, each second heavy with unspoken dread. Clara adjusted her notepad, ready to document the emotions unfurling around her. Yet, there was one voice that rose above the rest, an elderly man perched on the fringe of the crowd. He was a drifter, could have been trouble, he said, eyes fixed on the body. Never trust a stranger. His words dripped with a mix of foreboding and knowledge, but Clara caught the hurried glances shared among the townspeople there. Was more behind his commentary. An unacknowledged history lurking beneath their polite smiles. The officers began their investigation, carefully searching the surroundings for clues. Clara felt the weight of their task echo her own sense of urgency. In a town where secrets festered beneath the surface, she knew this crime scene would reveal much more than the remains of a life lived. He would expose the very heart of Maplewood itself, a town buried under layers of hidden resentment and unspoken truths. The early investigation. The air was thick with apprehension as the officers cordoning off the crime scene began their preliminary investigation. Officer Melissa Tatum, a sharp-eyed detective with a reputation for diligence, squatted beside the body, examining the facial features distorted by death. She noted the man's rugged hands, marked with calluses, signaling a life of late. A duplicate watch on the wrist caught her eye. The silver glint and ornate design raised questions. It didn't fit the apparent lifestyle of a drifter. "Call in the coroner," she instructed one of the uniformed officers. "We'll need to move him ASAP." As the sun climbed higher, officers began canvassing the area, seeking any signs of witnesses or evidence. Clara watched from a distance, her instincts a mix of journalistic duty and a visceral curiosity as she approached a petite woman with curls framing her face, who stood shivering despite her thick sweater. "I saw him last night," the woman said, her voice trembling. "He was at the inn. I thought he was just passing through." Her eyes darted nervously to the scene. "I didn't think he'd end up like this. Did he say anything to you?" Clara and Eden, hoping for a glimmer of insight. "Just ordered a drink, didn't talk much. But something felt off. He had this darkness around him," the woman replied, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. like he was running from something. As Detective Tatum concluded her initial examination, she shared a few words with her partner, Officer Dale Hudson. Clara's ear caught snippets of their conversation, their tone serious. "No ID," Tatum said, frustration evident, "but we'll find out who he is." Everyone has a story. Shatters. Clara returned to her notes, crafting a narrative rich with possibilities. With every new detail, a clearer picture emerged. A man with a past that, tangled with the town's few talk of past grievances, rippled through the crowd, echoing the ominous sentiment that echoed in the wind. As the first clues emerged, they ignited a small blaze within Clara's good determination that pricked at her heart like a thorn. She wouldn't rest until she had woven together the dark tapestry hidden beneath the quaint exterior of Maplewood. The stranger's fate intertwined with the town's secrets, and Clara was ready to dig deeper, even if it led her into the shadow. The dead ends. The investigation unfolded in the chilly days that followed the discovery of the body. Detective Tatum turned over every stone, yet every lead seemed to dissolve into smoke. The initial surge of panic had settled into an unnerving quiet. The town of Maplewood stunned into silence, reminiscing about yesterday's innocence. Even Clara, determined to piece together the narrative, found herself struggling to extract meaning from the chaos. Despite numerous interviews, the stranger remained nameless. As Clara navigated through her notes, she marked each potential lead with a red pen, the ink contrasting sharply against her meticulous handwriting. The innkeeper, Edith, recalled little about him, just a wandering soul. "But isn't that what we love about this town?" she had said, drawing her eyes upward, as if expecting the sky to divulge a hint. Though all wanderers can't be trusted, but Clara sensed it was more than simple reserve that cloaked the townsfolk in silence. One woman known for her gossip had stilled her tongue when interrogation was warranted, her eyes flitting nervously toward the townsfolk milling about. Clara noted the way shrouds were delivered like shields, protecting secrets. When Detective Tatum sought surveillance footage from the inn, nothing turned up. The strangest yet most damning element was the absence of any local reports regarding the arrival of a stranger. The inn had accommodated guests through the years, and yet the man seemed to have materialized from thin air. Frustration boiled within Tatum as she pored over the collected evidence, growing disheartened that nothing tangible remained under her feet. "We're running in circles," she muttered, tossing a pen against the desk. But Clara's instincts urged her to pursue every possible avenue. That evening, under a cloak of approaching winter gloom, Clara contacted local bars and cafes, seeking anyone who might recall the man. The response remained largely unchanged. Shrubs and pitying glances, as if she was chasing shadows. It left an itch beneath her skin, a feeling that the townsfolk were holding their breath, waiting. Just as Clara began to lose hope, she happened upon a single name whispered in the back of a dimly lit pub. Jack Delaney. The bartender had recognized it, merely as a passing conversation, one wrapped in vague concern. The name threaded through Clara's mind like a neon sign, flickering just out of reach, a potential path amid a labyrinth of dead ends. Driven with newfound determination, Clara resolved to trace this thread, praying it might lead to something substantial before the darkness deepened further in Maplewood. A break in the case. As the sun began to stretch its fingers through the early morning fog, Clara sat in her small kitchen, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee, while her notes sprawled before her. The name Jack Delaney echoed in her mind like a reed caught in the wind, dancing between the known and the unknown. She tapped her pen rhythmically on the table, contemplating her next move. With a renewed sense of purpose, she decided to search for Jack Delaney in person. The name had been cloaked in mystery, but Clara sensed it held weight. Perhaps he was connected to the stranger, and she needed to dig deeper into this last lead. After a whirlwind of phone calls and a trip to the local library, she discovered a faint trail. Jack was reported to have been a local handyman, known to frequent the community for odd jobs. The librarian, a sweet but forgetful woman named Mrs. Finch, recalled him as a man who carried whispers of mischief, and her eyes brightened a little as she mentioned a pair of broken front steps at the old Thompson house. Clara wasted no time driving through the winding streets toward the residence, her heart racing with anticipation. The Thompson house stood stark against the blue sky, its porch portraying years of neglect. With a few deep breaths, she pushed open the creaking gate, her mind swirling with the possibilities. She knocked on the door, apprehension mingling with excitement. An elderly woman answered, her weathered skin stretched taut across a frail frame. "Can I help you?" she asked, curiosity edging into her voice. "I'm looking for Jack Delaney," Clara began, her heart fluttering within her chest. The woman narrowed her eyes and stepped back slightly, a protective instinct evident in her posture. "I ain't say where he is," she replied, her voice shaken. "I told him to stay away from here. Do you know anything about him?" Clara pressed, sensing an opening. The woman hesitated, biting her lip. "He had run in with the law a while back," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "They said he got mixed up in a bad crowd." Before Clara could push for more details, a car suddenly pulled into the driveway. A young man with tousled hair, dressed carelessly in a hoodie and jeans, stepped out, dark circles lining his eye. At once, the elderly woman shifted her expression, worry washing over her features. "Jack?" Clara called, her voice threading through the air. His head turned abruptly, apprehension morphing into suspicion as he approached cautiously. "Are you Jack Delaney?" "I don't want any trouble," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Yet there was something in his gauzy, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even fear. Clara's instinct surged, recognizing this could be the break she needed. As he began to retreat, Clara stepped forward. "I need to ask you about the man found at the railway station," she urged. "Please. I think you know something important." The glimmer of recognition ignited in his eyes, but so did an instinct to flee. Clara's heart sank as he turned to run, hands trembling at his sides. In that moment she understood. He was a key. The town's secrets lingered behind walls, and Jack Delaney seemed caught in the web, struggling to break free. A suspect? Clara chased after Jack, her legs dried and hard against the ground, heart pounding as adrenaline surged through her veins. "Wait! I just want to talk," she shouted, but the distance between them grew too quickly across the Thompson yard. Jack had started down the road, glancing back only once. Fear chiseled into his features. He darted into an alley, and Clara hesitated, catching a glimpse of him spilling into a back street. "Please," she cried again, but the energy within her shifted from desperation to determination. She could not allow this opportunity to slip through her fingers. Jack was fast, but Clara was relentless. She rounded the corner, heart hammering, instincts guiding her as she pursued him deeper into the maze of Maplewood's back streets. As she approached the next intersection, the vibrant autumn leaves crunched underfoot, echoing her urgency. Just when she feared she might lose him, she spotted his form darting toward a dimly lit open door at the far end of a narrow alley, a dilapidated building. Hi, dilapidated building that bore the marks of neglect. Without hesitation, Clara bolted forward. Just as he disappeared inside. And inside, the air was heavy and stale, a mixture of must and something sharper, pungent, like fear itself. "Jack," she called, slowing. The adrenaline coursed through her, quickening her steps until she reached the threshold. The interior was dim, the only light filtering through grimy windows, casting eerie shadows on the cracked walls. She paused, feeling the weight of the quiet surrounding her. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, but she pushed forward. "Jack, I just want to talk." Her voice reverberated in the emptiness, then fell silent. Just as she contemplated turning back, she caught sight of a figure slouched at the far end, hidden in the shadows. "What do you want?" Jack's voice trembled, but his demeanor had shifted. He was laced with bitterness and vulnerability all at once. "Please," she said, inching closer and trying to keep her tone steady. "I know something happened at the railway station. I know you were involved." "Leave it alone," he snapped, his voice cracking. Boyish bravado faded as he raked his fingers through his hair, revealing deep-set eyes rimmed with desperation. "You don't know what you're getting into." "I need to know why the man died. Can you help me?" Clara asked softly, searching for an opening. She could see in his eyes a flicker of fear, tangled with knowledge, a raw emotion that might just unravel the truth. Jack shifted nervously, glancing over his shoulder, as though expecting someone else to join them in the shadows. I didn't mean for it to happen. I just wanted to scare him off. It got out of hand." The weight of confession bore down on her, and Clara instinctively took a step back. "You mean you knew him?" "I didn't know him. Not really," he murmured, voice breaking. "But he was dangerous. I was trying to protect my family." He was looking for something that wasn't his to take. The pieces of their conversation hung in the air, knitting themselves into a chaotic tapestry of confession and caution. What was he after? Clara pressed, sensing they were on the precipice of something profounder. Only Jack would talk. But the fragile trust seemed to evaporate as he raised his hands defensively. "You need to leave. You don't understand. It'll only bring more trouble." With that, Jack bolted, darting through a side door and out into the daylight, disappearing into the chaos of Maplewood once more. Clara stood in the shadows, breathless, her heart racing with mixed emotions. She was left with more questions than answers. Yet she understood one thing. Jack Delaney was hiding truths that reached far deeper than they both had begun to uncover. The trial. Months trickled by like autumn leaves through a shifting wind, and the town of Maplewood, once lulled into complacency, now braced for upheaval. With Clara's fervent research and Detective Tatum's relentless pursuit of truth, they pieced together an unsettling narrative. Jack Delaney stood accused of murder, the weight of his choices looming heavier than the town's quiet reputation could bear. The courtroom was packed, the tension palpable as townsfolk gathered to witness the proceedings. Clara found herself seated among strangers, the air thick with whispered interpretations and flaring indignation. The wooden benches creaked beneath shifting bodies, every eye fixated on the front, where Jack sat hunched, looking smaller than Clara remembered. As the judge entered, silence blossomed in an odd stillness that felt like a breath held before a storm. The gavel struck, bringing gravity to the atmosphere. The prosecution laid out its case with methodical precision, recounting the discovery of the victim, the flurry of blood, the unyielding implications of Jack's confession. He was an unpredictable menace, the prosecutor asserted, hammering the point home. Responsible for a needless death, driven by vengeance. The community deserves justice. Clara glanced at Jack, whose gaze remained locked on the floor, as if the burden of his actions barred him from facing the world. Witness after witness took the stand, and as Clara listened, snippets of information wove together a tapestry of tension. One testified about the victim's menacing presence in town. Another spoke of Jack's protective nature toward his family. There was an overwhelming sense that everyone had something to contribute, yet no one could see the bigger picture. The defense, however, offered a different narrativia portrait, emerging from the shading whispers that had encircled the courtroom. Jack Delaney acted out of fear and desperation, his attorney argued, underscoring the complexity of human emotion. He didn't intend to kill. There are layers to this incident that demand understand. Clara's pen scratched notes onto paper, an instinct deeply rooted in her being. Beneath the courtroom's sterile facade lay pulses of emotion, intertwined love, panic, a desperate need to protect those we cherish. It echoed past the crime, inviting her to delve deeper into the hearts of the individuals involved. As the trial progressed, it became evident that secrets ran deeper than mere actions. Worse, each witness cracked the door ajar to aspects of the town's history, backroom deals, and quiet conflicts that simmered just beneath the surface, hidden among cordial fronts and cheery greetings. When Clara finally stepped forward to testify, the magnetic weight of expectation pressed upon her shoulders. "Jack and I spoke the day before he was arrested," she began, meeting the judge's gaze with unwavering conviction. "He was terrified. He didn't view himself as a murderer. He was trying to protect his family from threats that ran cold and deep. I believe he reacted to fear rather than malice." Her words hung in the air, a haunting echo that merged her voice with the flurry of thoughts circling the courtroom. She could see the flickers of recognition ripple through the audience, grasping the complexity of Jack's despair resonated with their own fears. As the trial carried on, tensions ebbed and flowed in an emotional chess match, wherein each character played their role, narratives colliding and intertwined. Clara could almost feel the cracks in the town's facade beginning to splinter, whispering the undeniable need for change in the small community. It was about justice, but also about understanding the humanity that lay within every decision, the deep exploration of all that remained unsaid amid long-standing resentments. In the end, when the gavel fell, the verdict would not only determine Jack's fate, but it would seep into Maplewood's fabric, altering the course of the town forever. For Clara, the outcome mattered. But what mattered more was the awareness brewing among the townsfolk, a realization that their story had intricate layers they could no longer afford to ignore. The aftermath. In the weeks following the trial, the town of Maplewood wore a heavy cloak of uncertainty. Despite the verdict, the lessons imparted left a mark deeper than any finding could. The gavel's echo had hardly faded before the community began to reevaluate his values through reality, swirling just below the surface that so easily escaped recognition before the tragedy. Jack Delaney was convicted of manslaughter, sentenced to 5 years with the possibility of parole. Clara watched his reaction from the cramped courtroom, a mixture of resignation and relief shadowing his features. Yet his crime lingered like smoke in the air, a story of fear and desperate choices that would haunt the town for years to come. As Clara sifted through the aftermath, she was approached by friends and acquaintances, conversation steadied by cautious curiosity. "I just can't believe it," one woman said, shaking her head. "It's not how I imagined it would end." The innkeeper, Edith, summoned Clara over one evening, her expression serious. "The town needs healing," she said solemnly, her wrinkled hands gripping the edge of the table. "Maybe it's time we all start to talk more openly about the things that trouble us, instead of hiding them. We can't keep brushing things under the rug." The suggestion sparked something within Clara, igniting a sense of purpose. With a newfound urgency, she began organizing community meetings, where townsfolk could voice their concerns, fears, and questions. Merging her journalistic instincts with their desire to foster open dialogue, she reached out to her neighbors, eager to create a safe space for conversation. As attendance grew, conversations blossomed. They spoke about struggles with mental health, financial burdens, the solitude buried in their small-town lives, barriers that drove them to glance away rather than confront. The meetings became an outlet where grievances merged with aspirations, forming connections that had long been missing. At the beginning of each gathering, Clara would recount the tragic event that had brought them all together. "We were all touched by this," she would say, her voice steady, gaze unwavering. "It is a stark reminder that unresolved fears can drive people to make devastating choices." For many, these discussions transformed the town. New friendships kindled in the shared flames of vulnerability, creating a ripple effect that reached beyond Clara's expectation. The community found solace and accountability, learning that understanding the shadows could prevent tragedies from resuming their silent rule. As the chill of winter set in, Maplewood began to take on a fresh perspective. The once quiet streets radiated warmth, with lights illuminating window panes and laughter threading through the biting cold air. Clara marveled at how a simple impulse so forged in the urgency to understand had opened doors long sealed. Yet, despite the newfound hope in the atmosphere, shadows still loomed. Jack remained in prison, serving the sentence for actions born from fear and an instinct to protect. Clara often reflected on the complexity of his situation, how lives could spiral out of control. In those moments of quiet contemplation, she couldn't escape the thought. What would happen when Jack finally returned to Maplewood? His release would invite conversations she feared the community might not yet be prepared to face. No matter the progress, truth hovered precariously, needing vigilant caretaking. But for now, Clara embraced the light the community was beginning to heal. And with each day, the town dug deeper to understand the layers woven into its identity, confronting ghosts with a mixture of apprehension and renewal. It was a slow process, but one whose threads Clara was determined to follow wherever they might ultimately lead. Reflection. As winter settled its icy grip on Maplewood, Clara found herself reflecting often on the path the town had traversed since that fateful night by the railway station. Loneliness, desperation, and tragedy had stirred an unquenchable thirst for understanding, breathing new life into hidden voices and vulnerable truths. With each community meeting that passed, she witnessed the blossoming of communications, where once there had been only silence. Amid laughter and shared experiences, Hearts began to unravel their long-held burden, as if a veil had lifted. The townsfolk began to perceive one another's struggles, fears, and dreams, unveiled in hushed vulnerability. Yet Clara could not brush aside the looming shadow of Jack Delane. She mused on the threads of circumstance that had woven together paths leading him down the haunting road he now trod. How easy it was for fear to cloud judgment, to lead a person to fateful edges. It gnawed at her as the warmth of connection surrounded her. How could she reconcile the joy of community with the sorrow of a life unmade?